These are not your grandfather's Detroit Lions. Even at 2-6, they can put up points with the best of them, and the Chicago Bears need to be careful not to fall in some of the same traps that the Green Bay Packers did, losing to them last week.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, as long as Twitter continues to exist and survive for now. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today and hopefully every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On the show today, we put together a game plan for what the Chicago Bears need to do on Sunday in order to beat the Detroit Lions and take likely second place in the NFC North, assuming the Dallas Cowboys beat the Green Bay Packers and the Bears would then pass them on the NFC North standings. We'll start by looking at how this Bears offense should be able to keep things rolling against a Detroit Lions defense that's just plain not very good. I think they're last in the NFL, and what some of the things the Bears should be able to have some ease moving the ball with and what they may want to watch out for on that side. Then we'll turn our attention to how the Bears defense needs to slow down this Lions offense, what Detroit's going to be trying to do, and how the Bears can try and neutralize some of their strengths and really kind of put their weaknesses in the spotlight and make them beat you in the ways that they don't want to. We'll wrap up looking at the matchups that will go far in determining who wins this game and likely, again, claims second place in the NFC North. I'm expecting another higher scoring back and forth for the Bears with two teams that have been able to score big points and two defenses that have struggled to stop opponents. We talked to Matt Deary from Locked On Lions on yesterday's podcast, and he had mentioned the idea of the cornerback Jeff Okudah potentially playing that quarterback spy role against Justin Fields. We'll see how effective that might be because we've seen the Detroit Lions struggle against mobile quarterbacks. And I think the farther this goes, the more we're going to keep hearing Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields comparisons, but that's who the Lions played back in week 1, and Jalen Hurts rushed for 90 yards and a touchdown. And in that game, it was a similar formula to Fields usually, where it wasn't all just scrambling on passing plays. They mixed in a handful of those designed quarterback runs in a similar ratio that we see the Bears offense do. Some of those read options in there and some of those direct snap quarterback lead type running plays. And there should be some opportunities here for Fields to get things going again. Maybe not another record-setting performance 2 weeks in a row, but I think the Bears offense should be able to keep things fresh in regards to the ground game and get things rolling here. I certainly think a lot of the damage ends up coming on passing plays that turn into runs. The Lions aren't a low man coverage team, but they're not a high man coverage team either. They're kind of in the middle. You see it around like 30 or 40% of their defensive snaps. So there should be some time where Okudah is the spy or another player is spying, and they've got otherwise defenders with their back to the quarterback where Fields can get out in space. There should be some room to work there as well. In terms of the passing game, the Lions in the secondary, especially at the cornerback positions, they've got some bigger and longer cornerbacks. A lot of guys that are 6'1", 6'2", and have some length there. So I think in terms of how they match up physically, that might be a more favorable matchup for the Lions. With a guy like Chase Claypool, for example, that is that or N'Keal Harry, right? The Bears' two bigger bodied receivers that I think these Lions cornerbacks have the size and length to be able to jam, disrupt, and try and stay with, and not just be, bullied downfield by a bigger wide receiver, but perhaps that's more room for speed players to get going. Could this be the week that Velus Jones gets back into the offense and is able to outrun some of those cornerbacks that I wouldn't say the Lions cornerbacks are slow, but they're you oftentimes sacrifice a little bit of speed for that type of size. Or, can a smaller wide receiver like Dante Pettis win with more precise route running? I don't think these Lions cornerbacks are as fluid in terms of change of direction quickly. And can a guy like Dante Pettis stop on a dime and accelerate out of a break and find ways to get open that way, as opposed to being, more the bigger body type of wide receivers? I think Justin Fields should have some pretty good time to throw in the pocket. The Lions pass rush is not particularly robust. It's kind of, Aiden Hutchinson heavy, and they don't really have much else. And so, if you can throw a couple of blockers on Hutchinson most of the time, and he'll flip between the left and the right side, and, they'll go left tackle, right tackle. It's not going to be just, Braxton Jones one-on-one rookie versus rookie all game. But if you can pay a little more extra attention to him, I certainly would say make a different Lions pass rusher beat you with their one-on-ones. They have got some other young players in that group, some guys who have made some flashes, but not anyone who's consistently producing anywhere up to where Hutchinson is at this point. So I'm not overly worried about that. And I think Fields should have some time to stand in there and load up and take some shots downfield and potentially carve up this Lions defense, or turn into a scrambler, if plays start to go a little bit longer. The Lions run defense isn't great either. They're not super strong in that front seven. The linebacking core is uninspiring, and the interior of the defensive line is uninspiring as well. So should have a big game for David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and of course Fields as well. And that should allow them to, in theory, control the clock a little bit and dictate the terms of the game a little more, and do what they want to do offensively, and not feel like they're pressing too much. Presumably, as long as they don't fall behind on the scoreboard and have to turn to being a passing team only, that's always going to be a struggle here. But for this game, to me, it's going to be a lot about finishing in the red zone. We heard it from Matt Dirria yesterday about with the Packers last week. The Lions defense held the Packers to 9 points, and it wasn't because they shut down Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay offense. They still had plenty of yards moving the ball really, really well between the 20s. It's just they got into the red zone, and Aaron Rodgers turned it over 2 or 3 times, and they could not find the actual end zone. And so I think that's going to be the key for the Bears. They've been much better in the red zone in the last few weeks compared to the Commanders game and earlier games. So I'm not particularly worried about it, but how they execute down there in this matchup in particular, I think is going to go a really long way towards determining the final outcome, because I think the Bears should be able to move the ball pretty easily and get into the red zone. And if they can continue that execution on the goal line that we've seen the last couple of weeks, that's a pretty good formula to stay ahead of Detroit and move ahead in the NFC North standings. The key is going to be making sure that they're not outscoring you in this matchup. This Bears defense is going to need to band together here against a Lions offense that doesn't scare you in the same way that like the Dolphins did last week, but they've put up plenty of points this season, and you can't overlook the group that they have on that side of the ball. So we'll check in on what Detroit's going to want to do and how the Bears might be able to stop it next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You add your job posting for free, and they've got simple tools like screening questions that make it really easy to focus on the candidates that have just the right skills and experience that you're looking for, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires compared to their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This Lions offense only put up 15 points last week against Green Bay, and they certainly haven't been as explosive and as productive over the last few weeks as they were early in this season. But you can't just overlook and say, oh, well, it's Jared Goff and it's the Lions, and they don't have DJ Chark right now, and Josh Reynolds is also hurt, so what are they going to do, right? Well, they're still a very potent group, and they can still move the ball pretty well, especially on the ground. I mean, they've got 2 really good running backs, and I think that's what they're going to want to do in this game. I think they want to keep the ball out of Justin Fields' hands, slow things down, control that clock for themselves, and not let the Bears win that time of possession battle. Given that, I'm kind of the mindset that I would rather make Jared Goff beat you with his arm. And that's not to say, like, I don't want to make this, let's crap on Jared Goff for 10 minutes, because, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we kind of know what Jared Goff is at this stage of his career, right? He's not a difference maker. He's not a put the team on his back, 3rd and 10, I've got this, guys, let's go. He's a guy who can make some big throws at times, but more of a game manager type, someone who, if you put a really good supporting cast around him, he can take your team to the Super Bowl. He did it with the Rams. But short of a really good supporting cast, there are going to be some limitations in your offense and in your passing game. And I tend to think that DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams are largely the bigger threats there. They're just really good running backs. And I think this Lions offensive line has gotten better and better over the last few years. They have some real talent there now. But I do think they're a group that is much better running the ball. And then pass protection has been a little bit less consistent and solid there. So they're going to want to get moving north, south, and downhill and churn those running backs in this process. The Bears might get linebacker Matt Adams back from injured reserve this week. They opened up his practice window. We'll see if he's active for this game. I would assume he might be more inclined to unseat Joe Thomas as the third linebacker as opposed to Jack Sanborn, but I mean, they've been rotating those guys all over, so we'll see. But I think Matt Adams is a particularly good run defending linebacker, even if he has some deficiencies in coverage. But the Lions offense, especially after they traded TJ Hawkinson to the Minnesota Vikings, they're very much a 3 wide receiver team, an 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, and they'll spread you. They're not like a spread team, but they'll spread you out a little bit more to keep you from having 7, 8 guys in the box, because you have to have guys out on those receivers. And so if I'm the Bears, I think I do want to prioritize run defense a bit here. And you don't want to overdo it, but prioritize it in the sense that, like, put Jaquan Brisker in the box, maybe as much as possible, and understand that that's going to leave a lot more single coverage on those receivers, particularly on the outside. It doesn't have to be one-on-one man-to-man coverage, but even if it's in zone, it's still, you're not always going to have 2 deep safeties back there, a little more cover 3 in that regard, because you want to have that extra defender down in the box to keep Williams and Swift from making Jared Goff's job too easy. You want to get Jared Goff in 3rd and 8, 9, and 10, like we saw the Bears offense in too much at the beginning of the season. Make him have to throw on those 3rd and intermediate to longs that are really hard for, not great quarterbacks to keep picking up. But if Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift can get 4 yards on 1st and 2nd down and give him 3rd and 2s all game, then Jared Goff can complete the quick slant or the curl or the flat dump off and get the 2 yards when they need him to. I don't want to overlook their best wide receiver that's healthy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, brother of Equanimous St. Brown. I mean, I think he's a very real threat, and it's going to be a difficult matchup for these Bears cornerbacks. I wonder if maybe the Bears would consider having Jalen Johnson follow him all around the field. Wherever he lines up, Jalen Johnson lines up, and you kind of let everybody else move around that. Certainly, even if I'm in a single deep safety, if you have Brisker in the box and Jackson's deep, I want Jackson paying more attention to Amon-Ra St. Brown and not the other wide receivers you probably haven't heard of, like Khalif Raymond or Trinity Benson, or Tom Kennedy's kind of been their number 3 receiver in that rotation there. So, I think it's a matchup I can live with. It's like I want to start with Brisker in the box, and if all of a sudden our secondary is getting torched, then if I'm the defensive coordinator, I'm saying, no, our guys got to go back to 2 deep safeties and not be as focused, as narrowly focused on stopping the running game, especially because Kindle Vildor didn't practice either Wednesday or Thursday, and got injured during the game last week, so I'm assuming he will not be available in this one. And so Jalen Jones, the undrafted rookie free agent, will likely be that number 3 cornerback that comes in that nickel package on the outside. And so if I'm Detroit, that's who I would want to get my best wide receiver matched up with. So you could have Jalen Johnson shadow him to try and eliminate that ability for them to pick that matchup for themselves. But Jalen Jones has played pretty darn well for an undrafted rookie free agent cornerback. So maybe you can trust him. You can give him a few reps out there against Amon-Ra. If he gets burned once or twice, then all right, we got to adjust some things. But for now, see what Jared Goff can do and how much he can beat you with his arm and not the ground game. Also want to note that Al-Qadim Muhammad is also likely to miss this game with an injury after missing practice, which means more Dominic Robinson. And I think the Bears really need to make sure they get a pass rush on Goff because, again, he's a guy, if he gets comfortable in the pocket and has time to throw, he can hit throws downfield. Like, he's not a useless quarterback by any means. So the Bears pass rush has been struggling. And the Lions offensive line is not great, but it's in pass protection, but it's still pretty good. So, I'd be inclined to blitz a little bit more in this matchup and, really make sure that you're getting him uncomfortable, because he'll make mistakes with the ball, certainly, and he's not going to be a guy that's going to single-handedly beat you. So if you can disrupt his timing a little bit, I think that can go a long way. You don't got to go crazy on the blitzing, but blitzing can also help you stop the running game too. If you sort of build it as a run blitz that can turn into a pass blitz if they're going to pass in some of those situations, you bring an extra rusher here or there when you're short on the defensive line. I think that would be in the works for me if I'm defensive coordinator as well. I think winning some of those one-on-one pass rushing situations are going to be really key for the matchups in this game. We'll go through some of the other one-on-ones across the roster that I think will decide whether the Bears come out on top or whether the Lions all of a sudden find themselves in a win streak. That's coming up next on Locked On Bears. We're looking for the Bears to have a stronger defense against the Lions, and you need a strong defense for your home as well. If you've thought about home security, but you've been putting it off, now is the time to act, because Locked On Bears listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year. You don't want to miss it. You won't be able to get a better price than this. SimpliSafe has 24/7 professional monitoring agents with their proprietary Fast Protect technology that captures critical evidence to verify when threats are real, so you can get priority police response. It's not like the police are saying, okay, is this a false alarm or not? No, they know, they can tell when it's a real emergency and get those first responders there as first as possible. It's a whole home security system with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, plus HD cameras inside and out. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system we recommend here on Locked On Bears. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. It's simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. We've danced around a few of the matchups in this game that will be important, but I want to get to a couple others that we haven't specifically talked about just yet. Let's start with the Bears offense. I think if we're talking about bigger cornerbacks trying to get some speed, I like putting Darnell Mooney in the slot against, right now, Will Harris looks to be the slot cornerback for the Lions. He took over that role against the Packers last week, and they've had injuries at that spot in the secondary. They've been rotating guys around. I always thought of Will Harris as more of a safety, but they've had to kind of play him down there. He played some outside cornerback as well. It's kind of been everywhere for him, and he didn't look particularly comfortable against Green Bay. And so I like my chances with Darnell Mooney in that position, being able to beat him with speed, with good route running, and with good timing with Justin Fields. Take some of those shots up the seam there with him out of the slot, or breaking corner routes and deep out routes to the outside. Let Fields and Mooney cook. I think there's some real possibilities there that, this Lions secondary, at least at the cornerback spot, does not particularly scare you. Their free safety Kirby Joseph, we talked about yesterday with Matt Deary from Locked On Lions, 2 picks against the Packers and really coming into his own as a rookie safety. But he's the free safety back end type guy. But I see a more favorable matchup with their other starting safety, Deshaun Elliott. And I think there's an opportunity here for Cole Kmet to keep building off of the success he had last week, because generally the Lions defense hasn't done super, super well against tight ends. We saw Dallas Goedert have some pretty decent yards against them in week 1. We've seen Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys had a pretty big performance against them for a tight end. And then last week, Josiah DeGuara from the Green Bay Packers had a kind of a surprising breakout game. And a lot of his matchups are coming up against Elliott one-on-one, or at least sometimes going into Elliott's zone, or one-on-one matchups that I think the Bears can find with Cole Kmet, working that over the middle of the field, kind of behind the linebackers and in between. Because we've seen them make Cole Kmet more of a priority here, certainly down in the red zone when he had his 2 touchdowns last week. And I think especially in those areas when you get more of those cleaner one-on-one matchups, Kmet can slip out on some play action and find some open space that way, and the safeties have to come over. And especially if you've been running the ball so well and they're trying to focus on that and Kmet can slip out, I think there's some real possibility here for a similar sort of passing box score as last week, right? Where it was like Mooney and Kmet and a little bit of Chase Claypool in there. Like that's kind of what I'm anticipating. Again, go to your strengths there and where you can find some real matchups against the Lions. Defensively, I'd love to see how Dominique Robinson's going to do matched up. I would try and get him over the left tackle Taylor Decker. He's a former first-round pick. I think he's an Ohio State guy, if I remember right. They got 3 first-round picks on that offensive line, but Decker's been, I think, a little more inconsistent in terms of pass protection. There have been times teams have gotten some pressure off of Jared Goff's blind side there. And Robinson has been, especially in the absence of Robert Quinn, Robinson's been the most efficient pass rusher for the Bears in terms of he's not playing a ton of snaps, but he is winning his pass rush one-on-ones at a higher rate than his teammates on a more smaller sample size. With Al-Qadim Muhammad, I'm expecting him to not play in this game because he hasn't practiced through Wednesday or Thursday. That would mean more snaps for Dominique Robinson. And of course, Kingsley Jonathan as well, but Robinson likely then slots in as sort of the other starter there, and they'll rotate him back and forth to both sides. But I want to see what Robinson can do against Decker, if he can show a few of those flashes where he'll just have that speed and that motor and that hustle and at least get Jared Goff uncomfortable, even if it's not a multi-sack performance or anything like that. And then the other matchup, we talked about it, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus likely one of the Jalens, either Jalen Johnson shadowing him across the field or Jalen Jones, the undrafted rookie free agent, making sure you're staying on top of that. I mean, he's just a pretty dynamic receiver, 5'11", 200 pounds, can move pretty well. He's not like, a game-breaking speed, but he's just sort of shifty. He's got some similarities to Mooney in that way, where it's not like, you don't say like, wow, that's clearly the fastest guy in the field, but he's fast. And he's not big, but he's not tiny either, but he just, he's savvy, shifty, and works really well. So I'm curious to see how those matchups play out, because the other receivers for the Detroit Lions just don't really scare you that much, and you don't even have Hockenson as the tight end threat anymore. You have something called Brock Wright and James Mitchell, and those tight ends will get some run in there, but I think they're a little bit more involved in the ground game than being big-time dynamic threats in the passing game. I do think they're, as much as the reputation of this Lions offensive line is stronger improvement, and you see the first-round picks on there, I think there's some real opportunity here for Justin Jones against either of the guards, but Jonah Jackson at left guard and Evan Brown at right guard. I think there's some vulnerability there. I think I talk about Justin Jones almost every week on this podcast. Like, let's get some of this interior pass rush going. Either him or Armon Watts. Like, somebody get some pressure up in their face. These guys need to start playing a little better on the interior of this defensive line. And I think that's an area that, especially with somebody like Goff, that's not the most, agile, that there's a real possibility there to disrupt what they want to do offensively. But but with Robinson too against Decker, the ground game is going to be important there, because I don't think Dominique Robinson has been particularly strong in terms of holding down the edge there and not getting blown out a little bit on some of those running plays. So as much as it's a pass rushing matchup between Robinson and Decker, it's a run D matchup too, because Decker can grade you. I mean, he can get those legs turning, and he can move men. He's a big strong left tackle who can road grade a little bit there. So they need Robinson and Gibson on the two edges there to hold up on the ground game and not let those edges get collapsed, and let DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams get to the outside and have too much space getting to the second level. So I think those are the matchups that are going to go the furthest towards deciding what happens for the Bears in this game. We did predictions yesterday. I think the Bears should be able to win this one. I think it's also going to be another higher scoring game between two defenses that struggle a little bit, and it's a matter of which offense can outscore the other and really kind of capitalize on what the opposing defense presents. No matter what happens in the game on Sunday, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today, and hopefully every single day. If you're looking for your second listen, now that we're wrapping up Locked On Bears, go check out Locked On Lions with Matt Deary. We love Matt Deary. I mean, we're NFC North rivals, but we get along really well. I really have a lot of respect for the work that Matt Deary does, and there's no better way to get the advanced scouting report on your Bears opponent than getting our local expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network, because we are your team every day, and that includes all of the Bears opponents. So go check out Locked On Lions to get ready for Sunday's game. Then come on back for Locked On Bears on Monday. We'll break down whatever happens on Sunday. You can be sure we'll keep you covered right here. And you can always be sure we'll give you another opportunity to bear down.